Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Tribute to Terence McKenna event. Where is everyone tuning in from? Let us know in the chat. We have Toronto, Los Angeles, Eugene, New Zealand. Welcome, British Columbia. Hello. Castro Valley, Peru. Michigan and Baltimore. Thank you for being here. Belgium, South Carolina. Wow, we are just all around the world. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to the mycelial web that connects us all. Please utilize the chat box and type in where you're tuning in from for this incredibly special event today. April 2020 marks the 20th anniversary of legendary Terence McKenna's passing. And for the month of April, we are bringing to you the Tribute to Terence Fireside Chat series. And thank you for joining us for the third event in the series, honoring Terence's personal and collective impact. My name is Danielle Negrin. I will be your MC and host for today. I'm the Executive Director of San Francisco Psychedelic Society. And this event, this series, is brought to you by the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy and the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, both nonprofit organizations. The McKenna Academy explores modern and traditional practices, ideas, and technologies that foster the understanding of nature and the cosmos. SF Psychedelic Society is devoted to the exploration of entheogens and the expansion of consciousness by providing education, community, integration, and support. So for all that are new to Crowdcast, welcome to this new platform. This is the mycelial web that's going to connect us for the day. And a quick housekeeping if you're new to Crowdcast. So please utilize the chat bar to my bottom right. Feel free to comment on anything throughout the talk and build community in the chat bar. And share this event with your friends. So on mobile, there's a share button at the top of your screen. And if you're on the desktop, you can share 15-second clips from the bottom left that says clip moment. Also at the bottom below, if you click the green button, you can submit your favorites of Terence McKenna. So if you have any images, art, videos, clips, plug them in there and they will be shared on the McKenna Academy and San Francisco Psychedelic Society social media channels. So it's a great way to communicate and connect with us and keep Terence alive, as he is very much a part of our current culture. So a quick recap from last week. We started off the series viewing a never-before-seen film of Terence McKenna at Esslyn in 1989, followed by an incredible talk by our close friend Eric Davis and brother Dennis McKenna. On Saturday, we dove deep, reflecting into the interwoven lives and lasting ripples of Terence's impact with close friends Bruce Damer and Dr. Luis Eduardo Luna, and of course with brother Dr. Dennis McKenna. And today we are absolutely blessed to enjoy a 1-hour fireside chat with Dr. Dennis McKenna and Dr. Paul Stamets, followed by a live Q&A. So the talk will be for about an hour, and then we'll do a Q&A for a half hour. So please utilize the Ask the Question below me. Underneath the green button, it says Ask a Question, and feel free to submit your questions there. And if you see a question that you like or that you relate to, you can upvote a question, and questions will be answered based on their relevance and votes. After the Q&A, we're going to have breakout sessions. And the breakout sessions will be moderated by San Francisco Psychedelic Society volunteers and team. So please check out the breakout groups, which I will explain later. And then we will have a 10-minute break and join back here at 2:20 p.m. with Dr. Wade Davis. I just want to say a blessing to Kalindi Ailey, who passed away. Okay, here we are. Welcome back. Thank you. Sorry about that. This internet is exploding with over 5,000 views, so thank you so much for your patience with the blackout there. So I was just welcoming our guest honor today, our host, Dr. Dennis McKenna. Can you all see me? Okay, great. Hi. We cut temporarily and now we're back. So Dennis is an incredibly accomplished ethnopharmacologist focused on the study of hallucinogenic plants. He's the principal founder of the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy, the founding board member at Hefter Research Institute, key organizer in Huasca Project, and organized ESPD 50 conference. His work has been foundational in scientific exploration of ayahuasca, among many other realms. So welcome, Dennis McKenna.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Danielle. That's a wonderful introduction. Nothing like a little tech glitch at the very moment we're supposed to go on to kind of break my stride. But here we are, we're back. And I am really pleased to see so many people logging on to participate in this second installment of the Tribute to Terrence series. So today it's my extreme pleasure to be able to invite two of my old friends and two who are also old friends of Terrence. This is really a treat for me to be able to appear together with these two gentlemen. They are both thought leaders and well recognized in their respective fields. So our first guest today is Dr. Paul Stamets, who is practically needs no introduction to most of you. You're familiar with Paul's work. He is probably one of the few people that could actually claim the title of Mr. Mushroom. He's globally known and widely respected for his work in the area of mycology, both medicinal and psychoactive mushrooms. I'll read a short bibliography. This, believe it or not, is a short bibliography that I'm going to read. Paul Stamets is a speaker, an author, mycologist, medical researcher, and entrepreneur, considered an intellectual and industry leader in fungi, their habitats, medicinal uses, and production. He lectures extensively to deepen the understanding and respect for the organisms that literally exist under every footstep taken on this path of life. Paul's philosophy is that mycodiversity is biosecurity. He sees the ancient old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest as a resource of incalculable value, especially in terms of its fungal genome. His research is considered breakthrough by thought leaders for creating a paradigm shift for helping ecosystems worldwide. He's author of 6 books, including Mycelium Running, How Mushrooms Can Help Save the World, Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms, and Psilocybe or Psilocybin Mushrooms of the World. He has discovered and named 4 new species of psilocybin mushrooms. He's the founder and owner of Fungi Perfecti LLC, makers of the Host Defense mushroom nutraceutical supplement. Paul, welcome to our forum. It's lovely to see you.
Honored to be here. Hey, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have an hour and we can talk about whatever we want. I have some talking points, but tell me a little bit about your relationship with Terrence.
Well, first off, I'm in a remote island in British Columbia. I came up here expecting to only be up here for 2 weeks. I have a cabin up here, and then they closed the border. So I decided this was a really great place to get a lot of writing done and research, and so I'm telecommuting. Well, I really met both you and Terrence through the Austin Eric Psilocybin Magic Mushroom Growers Guide. I'm not sure which one was Austin, which one was Eric.
I'm Eric. Let's just clear that up right now. I'm Eric. Okay.
I've always wondered how you came up with those two names, Austin and Eric. There's a story.
I can explain if you want.
Yeah, I would love to hear it because it's the first for me, so it may be first for many people.
Okay, I can credit Terrence with the names. He came up with the names. O-N Eric is derived from the word oniric, which means dreams or having to do with dreams. And Otios is derived from odios, which means far removed or far away. So dreams from far away. That is a basic idea. And of course, at that time we were, at least Terrence was touting the notion that mushrooms were extraterrestrial. It's a romantic idea, I think, as a mycologist and a biologist. I think you and I both agree that sadly they are not extraterrestrial. They are not messengers from alien civilizations or alien planets. They're messengers. They're terrestrial. They're definitely terrestrial, and their message is terrestrial. But that's how they came up with the name. And I remember, I think the first time that you and I interacted a lot was at the Telluride Wild Mushroom Conference. I think the first time I was invited, it was 1980 or 1981. And we had a wonderful dialogue because I think my book, Our Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide, had come out just about then or fairly recently. And you were in the audience and I was talking, and I think I was making a lot of statements and probably which were, not true, but I was bouncing everything to you and say, do you agree with this, Paul? Is that correct, Paul? So it was really a sweet conversation. And then I did give a talk at the mushroom conference about how psilocybin maybe was important in the origin of consciousness. I think it was a little bit too edgy for most of the audience, and I wasn't invited back until 2017. so it goes,
I doubt I was too edgy, but to defend Terrence, spores can be extraterrestrial. Psilocybe cubensis, the most popular psilocybin mushroom grown in the world, is producing enormous amounts of spore mass on this planet, going out into outer space. So the spores are going extraterrestrially away from the Earth, the mothership, into the cosmos. So Terrence had it right. He just had it backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Like so many things, right? Yeah, I think that's right. Definitely, those spores are getting out into the cosmos, but their origin is the Earth.
Well, let me give us a little bit of perspective for people in the audience. So the Austin Eric book was phenomenally important for what I call the Psilocybe cubensis Scholarship Fund, practiced throughout colleges in Europe and North America in particular.
Yes.
It showed people how to grow psilocybin mushrooms on grain in jars in their closets, very mid-tech, but very low-level production. So many college students, many professors, many people of significance, I would say, have confessed to me after I've used the phrase the Psilocybe cubensis Scholarship Fund that they too, pay their tuition through that fund in their dormitories, et cetera. So it was a major movement. There was a psilocybin mushroom interest and exploded in the 1970s, and you and Terrence were very much a part of that. And the beautiful photographs by Jeremy Bigwood really made that book stand out, not only as content, but Jeremy's beautiful photographs of the blue background. So that really made it sort of noticeable on the bookshelf, and I greatly admire his skill in photography. So that was in the mid 1970s. I was little background. My brother John went to Yale, and I was the youngest one of my family. He's my oldest brother, so he was my mentor, and I love my brother John. Your Terrence has passed, my brother John has passed. So, our two brothers who are hugely important in our lives have moved on, and their influence on us continues. And I think about my brother John virtually every day. But he was a psychonaut, and we tripped a few times together and came up with the phrase, the family that trips together stays together. So
I guess that's better than the family that trips together flips together or something like that.
Well, that happens too.
When did your brother pass on, Paul?
He died in 2014.
Okay, so he lived much longer than Terrence, and was he your older brother?
My oldest brother, yeah. So
okay,
John,
my condolences.
Well, John went to Yale, then he got a full scholarship in neurophysiology at the University of Washington Medical School. And so he came out to Seattle. A bunch of his Yale buddies came out at a house in North Seattle. I was a logger hippie in the mountains, but I would come down to Seattle to go into the reference library at the University of Washington, in the science library in the basement. And looking for anything on psilocybin mushrooms. And virtually 90% of the books that I found had been razored out. The page, you probably remember, the pages have been ripped out because people were so desperate for information. So it's very difficult. And I was self-taught, and I joined the Pacific Northwest Key Council, a taxonomic group that wrote taxonomic keys. And so I started writing taxonomic keys on the genus Psilocybe, the major genus that holds most of the psilocybin mushrooms. And there were later genera in the Stropharia family. This is Hypholoma, Nematoloma, and Stropharia. It used to be called Stropharia cubensis.
Right.
Stropharia means sword belt, or a belt on a sword. And so it got moved to the genus Psilocybe. So I knew there was a cluster of taxonomically of species close together. And so I got under the wing of Dr. Daniel Stuntz at the University of Washington and the Pacific Northwest Key Council, the only long-haired hippie in the group. Lots of elderly people who took an affection to the fact that a young person, albeit his interest was a little strange, they brought me under their wing. And I spent many, many nights at the University of Washington Key Council with Dr. Daniel Stuntz, and he opened up his library to me. So when he opened his library, all those books that I was trying to get access to, he had them preserved. And we haven't talked about this, but simultaneously, you and Terrence are spending a lot of time at the Fitzhugh Ludlow Library. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
that was back when Fitzhugh Ludlow Library had a space, and I think in the Haight someplace. Now it's not clear where it is. It's virtual, but yes, he was good friends with Michael Horowitz, who was the curator of that library, and who actually moved to Vancouver a few years ago. I haven't seen him since I moved here, but yeah, that's right. That was that connection.
So there were two sort of meccas in terms of libraries that were intact. That had, and Harvard being another one, Yale not so much, but those three libraries were magnets for us who were interested in finding this information, because so much of the libraries have been basically people had ripped off the books, etc. And so my focus was that, and then I heard about Terrence and your work, through the grapevine. And then this individual, this character that we both know, an interesting character named Jeremy Bigwood, came up to the Psilocybin State College. I mean, the Evergreen State College. I'm sorry, I renamed it. Freudian slip on purpose.
Right.
And what had happened is Dr. Michael Bugh, my professor, had been called in to testify in defense of individuals who had collected psilocybin mushrooms and been busted by law enforcement. Because he was an organic chemist, he very quickly could see that the government's analytical methods were flawed, and they were pulling out all sorts of other tryptamines, but not specifically psilocybin. He kept getting their cases thrown out of court because he was an expert witness. And then Michael went on to write the analytical method that was accurate. And so Michael saw an interesting opportunity to saying, well, I could get a DEA license. And so Michael applied for a DEA license and put my name on it, as well as Jeremy Bigwood. So we were fully covered by a Drug Enforcement Administration license for all of our research, which caused, it sounds great initially, but we were paranoid anyhow, right? We were constantly paranoid. And so that meant every single person who came up to me with an interest in psilocybin mushrooms, by default, I thought, a lot of them are DEA agents, trying to trick me. So I came up with a motto, which I still follow: nature provides, I don't. So I've drawn that line in the sand has kept me very safe. I can write about it. I can speak about it. I can write books about it. But nature provides, Stamets does not. Okay. So just to make that clear to the 5,598 people who are listening.
All you DEA agents out there listening, I think the message is, if you want mushrooms, don't go to Paul. Right? Happy to dispense information, and this is what we have to do, and actually, ethics requires that. Mushrooms are easy enough to find in the wild. It takes a little bit of education and some library research. You could start actually with Paul's book, one of your landmark books, and among the many that you've written is Psilocybin Mushrooms of the World. And it has some of the best photography of psilocybin mushrooms I've ever seen, including beautiful electron micrographs of spores and this kind of thing. And that's all work you did in Michael Bugh's lab. Right. So you guys created a little nest of basically radical mycologists here. It was the I would say the seed, but maybe more appropriately, I should call it the spore of this movement. I mean, you did some very basic research in that lab that eventually found its way into the world, like the analytical methods and so on. So you created a little, not so little, it turns out. You created a revolution in that lab at Evergreen State.
It was more than just me, of course. It was a core group of people. The bizarre thing is Jonathan Ott was there with Michael Bugh also. And he's a well-known psychonaut, written a dozen books. And Jonathan went to study with Gaston Guzman in Mexico City, who wrote the monograph on the genus psilocybe. And then I came into the laboratory, and then a year later or so, Jeremy came into the laboratory. So Michael Bugh's center there populated or spawned, or whatever you want to call it, three of us in particular, who went on to collectively, I think we wrote 20 books. And Michael Bugh is a dear, lovable professor. He's the type of professor I think all of us aspire to have, someone who's kind and genuine, who's humorous, and he never shamed me. And I think this is so important. He never shamed someone who knew less than him. They enjoyed laughter and engagement, poking fun at you, but not in a mean way, not in a way that is demeaning, but in a way to engage you in the excitement of conversation. And so I have an enormous debt of gratitude to him, because he's one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life, and I'm so honored to be one of his students. So there's a lot of really interesting things that were happening in the mid-1970s. And so Jeremy came up from the Fitzhugh Ludlow Library and came to Evergreen. There was Dr. Stephen Pollack, who was in San Antonio, Texas. And at one point, Jonathan, Jeremy, Stephen Pollack, even Terrence were all friends. And then it became highly politicized, very big egos involved, lots of competition. Jonathan's sort of mantra was he wanted to write the history. He wanted to be the person who wrote the history. A little bit of concern about that. But
yeah, but I can see why.
He's an intellectual giant. He's an absolute, 10 times smarter than I am. And then R. Gordon Wasson came to visit. Then Albert Hofmann came to visit the Evergreen State College. And then we decided, Preston Wheaton, myself, Jonathan Ott, decided to create the first psychoactive mushroom conference in 1976. Now, this is bizarre, because we had all these professors from the University of Washington and elsewhere. We invited them to this conference, but we wouldn't tell anybody where the conference was. So
probably a good idea, right?
We didn't have internet back then, right? So we immediately had 125 people sign up, and they came to the Evergreen State College, and they were told to basically bring a sleeping bag and a backpack, and we would not disclose where the location was. So at the appropriate time, they showed up, at Red Square, the Evergreen State College, the front campus, and we had rented buses. And so 125 psychonauts, not knowing where they're going, trust us. Then we drove them about 25 miles away to Miller-Sylvania State Park. And we had to do a lot of background stuff in Miller-Sylvania State Park to allow us to have the conference. So, but I like to record this for the sake of history, because I don't want people to forget this, is that on the opening night of the conference, which was at 9 o'clock, was the first talk, which was mine. The intros began at 8 o'clock. Well, somehow, word got out, and R. Gordon Wasson was there, Jonathan Ott, myself. I had a little bit of a falling out with that group. I think it was a money grab. I don't really know. But they said, listen, Paul, you start the conference. And they were not there. We have 125 people getting restless. It's 8:15, 8:30. Where is everybody? The sponsor, I was kind of put out the pasture, but I'm now leading the first speaker. And so I got a note, and they said, go ahead and start the conference, Paul. And the word had gone out that the DEA was going to bust the conference. So they put me up on stage. Paul, we're not coming to our own conference. And I'm going, WTF, dudes. So I'm there. I'm like super paranoid, and I have to give my opening talk. And of course, the conference did not get busted. And then Jonathan and Jeremy and R. Gordon Wasson showed up the next day. So let this be recorded in history. So anyhow, the conference was a wild success. David Repke was there, Dale Leslie. The next year, Gaston Guzman came. Daniel Stuntz was there, Jonathan Ott co-authored with Dr. Gaston Guzman, Philosophy Stuntii. Now, what had happened, and this is quite remarkable, in the Pacific Northwest, the mycologists did not even know what psilocybin mushrooms looked like, because it wasn't until the advent of beauty bark and wood chips around buildings that the psilocybin mushrooms literally came out of the forest. And it's still, to this day, we think they may be endophytes, many of them existing inside of a tree. And only when the tree is chipped up, then the mycelium then rebirths and the mushrooms form. But Psilocybe cyanescens, Psilocybe baeocystis, Psilocybe stuntii, many of these psilocybin mushrooms that are wood chip growers had never been seen by mycologists who've been studying mushrooms for 40 or 50 years. It's only the invention of beauty bark. And so suddenly all these psilocybin mushrooms started coming up around universities, around courthouses, around law enforcement facilities. The biggest mushroom patch I've ever seen was in front of the Boat Street patch. It was in Washington, in front of a police station. Right. And so it was just a phenomenal surge. And so Dr. Daniel Stuntz was getting all these psilocybin mushrooms going, I've never seen these. And then he realized that they had not been named. And so in honor of Daniel Stuntz, Jonathan Ott and Gaston Guzman named this unknown species from the University of Washington campus after Daniel Stuntz. It was going to be called Psilocybe pugitensis for growing in the Puget Sound area. And then the name became Psilocybe stuntii. So that was
you named it?
No.
Psilocybe stuntii, or who named it that?
Gaston Guzman and Jonathan Ott.
Yeah.
Co-author of that species.
Boy, it's so interesting to hear you reel off these old names. I mean, this is incredible. David Repke, Dale, I can't even remember his name, but all of these names resonate with me in memory to the extent I have a memory left,
Gary Mentor, was also a big, really important person. He was a competitor to me, but he was one of the nicest competitors I've ever met. And Gary
Leslie, he did a lot of work on the chemistry, as I recall. Yeah. I wanted to, just as an aside, you mentioned the book, and Jeremy Bigwood was the photographer for the book, and his color photographs, the color inserts, were quite beautiful and stunning. And of course, the cover of the book had his photograph on the cover, which got a lot of people's attention. But his black and white photographs that showed how to do it were, by and large, very small, kind of not great photography, you know. I mean, there was enough information there to show how to do it, but I always was amused by the fact that Jeremy chose for his pseudonym on the book. He called himself Irenaeus the Obscure. And I used to kid him, Jeremy, is that a reference to your photographs here? Because they're not very clear. And of course, he denied that. But yeah, he's.
We also have to give credit to Kat Harrison. Okay, Kathleen Harrison was also, part of the four of you, and she did lots of illustrations too. So big shout out to her. So
yeah, she did the illustrations, did a beautiful job. In fact, I have one of her original drawings on my wall right here. I'll show it to you if I can reach it without unplugging something. Let me see.
Oh yeah, excellent. Well, look at this, and look at this.
Yeah, this is a gift that Kat made many years ago, and she drew this when she and Terrence were staying in Hawaii together.
This is great because, see, this is a replicate mushroom stone, a Mesoamerican mushroom stone from the Maya culture, the pre-classic and classic period, 500 BCE to 500 AD. But this is the only mushroom stone that I know of a woman warrior. A woman warrior. She's got this skirt around, and so most of them are male figures or animal figures, lizards, toads, etc. But this is the one that currently is the original is in Zurich, Switzerland, in the museum there. But this is the one, and so it's my favorite mushroom stone. So Kat Harrison drawing that one, she also had that same attraction to this very unusual mushroom stone. But let me, for historical purposes, and I hope there are some psychonautic historians out there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm as deeply into this. In 1957, Alexander Smith and Rolf Singer published a monograph on the genus Psilocybe. And Roger M. and R. Gordon Wasson spent a lot of time with Don Pablo Ross Rico, I think, or something like that.
Yes.
Who was really accredited with one of the first ones who brought out this knowledge to Western science. The Q and Darrow has been practicing for thousands of years, so we were pretty much outsiders to this knowledge.
Right.
But this monograph was published, and apparently it was published, I think, about 3 months, or maybe only 2 months before the Les Champignons hallucinogènes du Mexique was published, which was the Roger M. And R. Gordon Wasson's, massive work.
Yeah. Monograph on the Mexican psilocybes, yes.
And because of the international rules of nomenclature, whoever publishes in a peer-reviewed journal first, with a Latin description typically, their names take precedence. So this created a huge divide. And it basically became a war between the academic mycologists in France versus the United States, Rolf Singer and Alexander Smith. Alexander Smith is considered the father of American mycology, University of Michigan. Rolf Singer was a great taxonomist. But 2 points I want to make. In the second part of their monograph, they show how to grow Psilocybe cubensis on grain. There's a complete description on how. So I suspect that's where Terrence and you may have seen that part of that monograph and the techniques for growing Psilocybe cubensis on grain.
No, that's not where we saw it. I'll tell you where we saw it.
Where did you see it?
I saw it. There was an article, a paper in Mycologia, which is a journal, peer-reviewed journal. Every mycologist knows what Mycologia was. Came out about 1974, and it was a paper about how to grow mushrooms on grain in mason jars, exactly the technique that we used. Except the person that wrote it, I forget his name. It was a funny name, and I forget the name, but it was a technique that he had published for mycologists who wanted to do genetic research, on mushrooms. They could grow small amounts. It was applied to the common edible mushroom, Agaricus bisporus, And I got this paper, and well, we had mushrooms in mycelia. We had plates and all that. Our attempts to grow liquid culture had been dismal failures. So just on a hunch, I thought, well, let's try this. And as it happened, I happened to be at the Colorado State University. I'd already gotten my degree, but I'd gone back to Colorado State to get organic chemistry and more taxonomy, and this on the recommendation of Schultes, because I was trying to get into graduate school at Harvard to work under Schultes. And I actually made a pilgrimage out there, which I described in my book, to meet the great man. Schultes was incredibly kind to me, and I think to everybody, that crossed his path, because he loves students. You mentioned a few minutes ago about mentors, and I think for you and for me as well, mentors are far more important than the institution you study in.
No,
I got my master's at the University of Hawaii, and then my PhD at UBC, but University of Hawaii, nice place, but not top tier academic institution. But my mentor there, Dr. Sandy Siegel, who then introduced me to Neil Towers, another amazing mentor, he was one of the most out-of-box thinkers I've ever run into. He was an environmental toxicologist, and his bailiwick, his specialty was stress physiology. So he studied organisms that lived in volcanic vents and this kind of thing. And he was just, I can't tell you how much I owe to those two gentlemen, Neil Towers and Sandy Siegel. Now, as a postdoc, I had some other mentors who were like, the supervisors from hell, but we don't need to go into that. But these two mentors, and so it's really affected my own mindset in the sense that I feel it's important to be receptive to students, and encourage them to go for what they're interested in. And, this is really one of the most gratifying experiences I have. And I think you too, Paul, you're a great teacher. And I love teaching. And this is the whole thing about the McKenna Academy, is to have it be a place of education where people can come. And even if they have crazy ideas, and lots of us do, they'll be respected, they'll be heard, not necessarily believed, but they'll get a hearing. And this opening this thing up as a forum for ideas is the whole motivation, and I really appreciate your support for the Academy and everything you've done, in general. So,
Terrence frequently referred to you as my brother's a real scientist. I'm not.
That's true. Actually, that's true. I mean, he knew science, but he didn't study it, and sometimes I've listened to lectures and so on that he's given, and most recently the video. But the point is, he wasn't a detail person. He was an idea person. So maybe he named one of the constituents of ayahuasca incorrectly, but so what? The point is, his ideas were valid, and that's very interesting. Let me ask you, we're kind of drifting away from Terrence, but I wanted to ask you, so this conference that you described to me, this first conference, he was not there.
No,
right?
Schultes and Wasson was at the second conference. So there's a 1976, 1977. Then we began a series of mycomedia conferences that I put on with my two other partners, and then Terrence came to one of those at Brighton Bush Hot Springs.
Right.
And that's why Terrence and I really first spent a lot of time with each other. And what I enjoyed about Terrence is he would laugh at himself. He would laugh at his own mistakes. And he had a
important
sense of humor. He was wrong, and he would emphatically defend himself. But at some points, he also would just give up. And he goes, I'm totally wrong. And I just,
I wish our president could learn that trait, you know.
His concept of time wave to zero, you know, he had the end of time being on his birthday. And I got, okay, you know, let's talk about this, right?
Right.
His time wave zero was an algorithm that constantly adjusted to current events. So it's a self-correcting algorithm. Well, that's good for algorithms are self-correcting, but this time wave zero thing is something that, frankly, I never got behind. But I do want to give credit, and I do think it's plausible, and I've stated this many times. Your stoned ape theory, which I call a hypothesis, is becoming a theory, because now we're seeing that psilocybin and psilocybin analogs do cause neurogenesis. We do say that they have a profound lasting effects, making people better citizens, healthier, better partners, a reduction in partner-to-partner violence, more empathy, being able to face the end of life. So you and the now we are our research. We're not using psilocybin. We're using legal psilocybin analogs. We've been spiking these into pluripotent stem cells. These are basically stem cells that differentiate into neurons. And we've done like 5 sets of experiments now, and we have shown that these psilocybin analog, which are perfectly legal, and we know that psilocybin does the same thing from other people's research, stimulates neurogenesis, causes new neurons to form, to proliferate, to fork, causes remyelination on the axons. And so you two are way ahead of your time. One of these stone journeys that you went on came to, I think, an empathic truth. There are some things that you hear, and over the body of evidence that is accumulated in the past 40 years, I think you and Terrence have came upon something that is truly profound. And I think it will be increasing evidence over time will further support this, not being a hypothesis, but being a truly a well-founded theory.
Yeah, the stoned ape theory is something that it's very easy just to dismiss it out of hand, you know, which is what most people have done. Well, the very idea, we got smart by eating mushrooms, you know, that's absurd. Don't bother me with that. That was never the argument, you know, and people that want to oversimplify the idea so that they can dismiss it, I feel sorry for them, because like you, I feel that there is a core of truth there. We don't know how far back in evolutionary history, the history of our species, that hominids, even people that were not yet human in the sense they weren't Homo sapiens, they had to stumble across mushrooms in these environments, these savanna environments that they were inhabiting. And Psilocybe cubensis is a perfect example. I mean, it's not a shrinking violet type mushroom. You know, it's big, it's robust, it's yellow and purple. You can't not notice it, you know, if you're walking through a pasture, especially if you're looking for something to eat.
Right.
You know, so it's naturally people would have eaten it. And then I think, I mean, Terrence had various reasons for arguing for the stoned ape hypothesis, and I had also a different take on it. But my take was it enabled us to have to interiorize ideas, essentially, to create abstractions that were meaningful, that were linked to language and image, that were actually the basis of ideas. It enabled early hominids to form complete idea complexes, and this is what we do as humans. I don't think that I don't think that animals by and large create essentially models of reality, and that's what we do. That's the whole thing that we do. Everything we do is an attempt to reflect our, you know, the models we construct reflect the world we live in an abstract way. Mushrooms gave us that talent, I think.
When I started exploring, you know, whether this is a credible hypothesis or theory, I came across research that 22 primates consume mushrooms. 22, 23 with humans. That speaks to a long ancestry of primates having encounter with fungi, knowing which ones are edible, which ones to avoid, which ones to seek out. So when you do that, 23 primates have a history of consuming mushrooms. The Golgi monkey of Bolivian Amazonia consumes more than 12 times its body weight per year. So when you consider that, and then as climate change occurred, the Stone Age theory postulates that, our primate ancestors go across the savannah, tracking animals, looking at ungulates primarily. You look for footsteps and scat, poop.
Right.
And
right.
You run into last week events, you're hungry, you eat it, you share it with your loved ones, and suddenly you have this voyage that's extraordinarily powerful and meaningful. And I believe psilocybin makes nicer people. And we need...
I think there's good evidence that it does. Yeah.
We need leaders who are courageous and kind. Where are those leaders today? You want to follow a leader that you can trust, who is strong and courageous, but also has the interests of the commons foremost in their mind, not their own personal interest. And I think that the psilocybin mushrooms will lead at a time that we need to have a revolution for the freedom of consciousness. I think this COVID-19 period that we're in could be our time for this paradigm shift, where we can reinvent and reprioritize the values that we used to aspire to, as peoples, and unified in a common mission. And now with technology and money and capitalism and loss of biodiversity, this narrative has been hijacked by highly moneyed interests who do not have the commons in mind. So I think this is the time for us to truly do a reset on consciousness. And I'm hoping that this worldwide movement will propel us into that future.
Yes, I agree. I think in that sense, I think that COVID is a kind of a gift, from nature. It could have been much worse. It could be much worse. It's bad enough, but I think nature is sending a message. Here's an opportunity for learning. If you listen to this and reflect on it, and then reflect on our place, we have to my whole shtick is I talk about the fact that we become alienated from nature. And this stems out of the notion that we think we own nature. We think it's here to, for us to serve and exploit and ultimately rape. This is a message from nature saying, hey, you monkeys, this is just a gentle tap on the wrist to remind you that you're not running things. You're part of nature. You have to learn to live within the constraints of nature, because as a species, we're destabilizing all the mechanisms of equilibrium that sustain life on Earth. I wanted to, since you mentioned COVID, and when Terrence passed on in 2000, so many things that it seems like another world. It's another century, but so many things that have happened since that Terrence never witnessed. I don't know if he anticipated, 9/11, the financial collapse, the wars in the Middle East, advances like the YouTube and the iPhone, social media. What do you think Terrence would have made? What would he have had to say about our current existential historical situation?
Wow. I mean, it'd be dangerous for me to speculate, but I think this, the fact of he was aware of the computer internet. It was just, getting more and more robust, just before his death. I think seeing the interconnectedness of nature is the paramount message that we get when we journey on high doses of psilocybin. So yes. I think the interconnectedness of consciousness that we're doing right now, on this platform with people all over the world. There are people from Russia right now and from New Zealand, from all over Europe. This is the collective consciousness of being. And I think Terrence would see this as a fulfillment of his pioneering work. This is an extension of it. So I think he would have a great gratitude in a sense that we are now more interconnected as a community. I think also he would be horrified at the track that we have been on that has gone away from indigenous knowledge, the respect for biodiversity, the respect for the ecosystem, and this short-term gain that people play in order to get money at the long-term expense of the commons, I think is a debt of nature that we have to pay. And that's what I think this is the beginning of viral storms. I've been talking about this for over 20 years, and many virologists Larry Brilliant, Bill Gates, lots of people have talked about why haven't we had one sooner of this magnitude? And this is the sad and difficult news for many people to understand, because now we have hundreds of millions of people being reservoirs for COVID-19. You can have more than one virus simultaneously. And
Right.
so the exchange of genetic material, most of these viruses dilute out in their pathogenicity. Not all of them do. But we could be in a continuous period of viral storms, one after another.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's time for us to brace for impact. This is a wake-up call for us to reinvest in biodiversity. Look at all the air pollution that's gone away. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the Taj Mahal could be seen, with blue skies. Beijing has clear skies. This is good for us to see that we are having such an impact on the ecosystem that when we stop our activities, nature recovers quickly. So I believe in the resilience of nature, but I hope we have this as a deep lesson that we are influencing the ecosystem dangerously with our pollution and our expansion and the out of control human population explosion. It is time for us to really start reinvesting in the biodiversity of nature. And so I think the fungi and these mushrooms open up the mind's eye to the importance, the gestalt of our existence in this reality. Nature is our mother. We should take care of her.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it seems like it's an obvious lesson, but it's one that we easily forget. And that it's interesting. I mean, as a species, we have such a short memory. Who remembers the 2018 or the 1918 to 1920 influenza epidemic? Many of the lessons that we're relearning were learned then. And, we just don't seem to be able to integrate these lessons of history and change our behavior, which is disturbing. I think that you're absolutely right. Terrence was, whether or not his ideas about the time wave were correct, I think that he was right on the money when he predicted that there is going to be a huge shift, an existential shift for the species and the planet. We're living through it now. We're seeing this now. He was not correct in the particulars, but he was, he got the year wrong. He got lots of things wrong. But basically, the idea of a singularity or a tremendous existential shift in the way that we have to live in this world if we're going to continue, he was right on the money with that. So in a sense, I think he would look around and at what's happening. He would probably be dismayed. A lot of us can be dismayed at what's happening. He would also, but he would not be surprised. He was talking about this from the late 80s, and we've all seen it coming. We can look back, we can say, oh, the environmental crisis and climate change, all this, if only we'd started to do something about it 30 years ago, we wouldn't have this problem, or we'd be much more on top of it. We're not very good at anticipating the future and planning for it. This disturbs me. This may be what eventually kills us as a species. We can't think ahead.
Well, Neil Young wrote songs on this that were popular, predicting this. So it's part of a gestalt of a sort of a subculture of us that we're treated as if we were kind of the left environmentalists that were pot smoking hippies who didn't have a clue. Well,
right.
Pot smoking hippies created the internet. They're now populated some of the best universities throughout the world, and they are really taking their responsibility for making this environment a better place for future generations quite seriously. And it's very interesting to me. And I speak of this in the movie that we were both in, Fantastic Fungi by Louis Schwartzberg. It's interesting that irrespective, there it is, a plug.
He didn't ask me to show it. I just had it handy. I wanted
fantastic
piece of work, Paul. Just incredible.
FantasticFungi.com, April 21st, there'll be another session like this on the movie. But irrespective of whether shamans saw illness as caused by in spirits in the invisible, or whether it's caused by scientists would look at it as caused by microbes or viruses. They share it in common that the disease states can be caused by something that can't be seen. And I think that in First Nations, and especially in North America, the concept of 7 generations is such a wise lesson that we need to learn. What is your effect 7 generations from now?
Right.
You have a responsibility to your descendants. And even in the Bible, I grew up in a Christian environment. You're supposed to leave the environment in a better place than you inherited it, and take care of your body as your home. Well, that's or the ecosystem. So it seems to me that we have some really poignant lessons to learn from indigenous peoples, and those of us from European descent. The Eleusinian mysteries, 2,000 years ago, for over 1,000 years in Greek time, thousands of Greek citizens across all cultural strata would walk, a dozen plus miles, heckled along the way to a great telestron, a temple with pillars, and they all imbibed in a fungal mixture. Plato, Sophocles, Aristotle. And so it's not just Mesoamerican and South American and North American indigenous people, it's European indigenous people. So this is the bridge of consciousness that we share. And I think it's time for our citizens of the world to wake up and to create the paradigm shift that's so needed, because we will be ejected as a species if we don't. Extinction is normal. 99% of all species become extinct. We'll be no exception. And so we should very seriously.
Exactly, because Gaia, if you want to think of it that way, will find them. I don't worry about Gaia. Life on Earth will persist, but in order to persist, it may have to call us or radically reduce our population, and that's what's happening. It's a pretty grim prospect. But on the societal level, I think we need, and this is exactly what the McKenna Academy is about. We want to reinstitutionalize the cultural institution of Eleusis, where this was integrated into the culture. Everyone who was anyone in Greek culture at that time made this pilgrimage to Eleusis. They imbibed the telestrion. They had an experience which they weren't supposed to talk about, but it was a transformative experience. And, Eleusis was the longest lived and also the most recent of the mystery schools. And they were all basically pagan. They were matriarchal. They were based on the worship of the feminine, and they were ecstatic mystery religions involving the use of plant and fungal psychedelics. I look forward to the day. I'm very encouraged by the decriminalization movements that are going on. They're kind of, coming along by fits and starts. But I look forward to the day when every community can have a center that you can go to that's legal, that you can have these experiences and get other types of education too, like do yoga, learn about nutrition, learn about how to take care of yourself and how to garden, how to grow mushrooms, how to, really through action integrate or put into practice what we're always talking about, which is we have to get back in harmony with nature and learn that, number one, nature is running things. We are not. Number two, we still have a hell of a lot to learn from nature. One of the big messages I always get from my psychedelic experiences, whether with ayahuasca or mushrooms, is remember how little you know. There's an infinite amount of things that you don't know. Even though our science is clever and we think we've nailed down a lot, most of the world, most of the universe is still a great mystery, which doesn't depress me. It actually excites me because it means there's so much left to learn, and that's the whole idea of what we're trying to do. So, my God, I can't believe we're, an hour has passed. I guess we have to go to questions, but anything else that you want to say before we do that?
Well, Burning Man just got canceled, and sadly,
That's
but
too bad.
But many of these festivals, like Burning Man and the Envision Festival and other festivals, Lightning in a Bottle, etc., they have become this magnet for all these young people. But the organizers have realized this is a time for us to help educate these people. They're coming
Right.
for music, but let's add a new curriculum of education. So I want to applaud the leadership of those movements, because they see this as an opportunity to also pass on knowledge. So we need a new curriculum of life sciences.
Mhm.
We need to prioritize those with that which is economically rational and economically sustainable, because the economy of ecology budgets nutrition for the benefit of the species that are resident within. So economics and ecology are not incompatible. They are part of the ecological systems.
Right.
I think we need to promote those that are ecologically rational and economically sustainable so the message can be carried on. And so I'm hoping that many of the people out there will take the torch and bravely and courageously move forward with kindness and purpose and respect for Native Indigenous peoples all over the world, of which we are also a member. So
yes, everyone is indigenous to Earth, right? And yeah, we have to reinvent social principles, and I think fungi and plants in general, but especially fungi, they do what they do through symbiosis, right? We have to symbiosis being a mutually beneficial interaction between organisms of different species. And one of the primary examples of this is the mycorrhizal relationships that fungi have with trees in these old growth forest systems. You've written about this very beautifully in many books, especially Mycelium Running. And, you know, one of the things that hold us back, you know, in terms of our advancement as a species, is this idea of competition. The old Darwinian idea, you know, that survival of the fittest. If I win, you have to lose. It doesn't work that way. Nature works through symbiosis. Nature works through collaboration. It works through forming networks and associations that rise all ships, as it were, or benefit all the parties. We have to somehow educate people that capitalism is what's gotten us to this stage, because it's based on this scarcity idea and, you know, taking, consuming, and marginalizing people. We have to get past that and develop new social paradigms, and symbiosis provides the model for this. You know, so that's what that's what nature can teach us, among everything else. Yeah. So let's see. Where is our tech person? We probably should go to questions here. There she is. Okay. Are we on schedule, Danielle, more or less?
We are right on schedule. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that incredible talk. And we are now going to bring in questions from the interconnectedness of our consciousness through the World Wide Web here. So let's start off with, what was Terrence like coming up to his death, and what would he say about it?
Whoa.
Repeat it again. What was he like?
Coming up to his death, and what did he say about it?
Well, you want to comment on that?
Well, I was with him, you know, just before he died, and Terrence and I became good friends the last 5 years of his life, and he saw death as entering into the great mystery. He would not be bashful in saying he was concerned and afraid, but he was also told me that he was excited because he was moving on into a different form. And he was like intellectually curious about death. And I'm going, dude, you're dying and you're interested in the intellectualization of death. And I thought, this guy is way beyond my level of being able to conceive. But Dennis, you being his brother, I'm sure you had deep conversations with him on that.
Well, we did have conversations about it. Of course, when you're dying, naturally you're afraid, or you can be afraid, and you can also be curious. I mean, it's not unlike the way you might feel when you're about to take a high dose of a psychedelics. If you don't have some butterflies in your stomach about this, you're not paying attention. On the other hand, that doesn't inhibit you. It's curiosity that drives you forward, that gives you the courage to go ahead and subject yourself to that experience because of what you might learn. And I think Terrence approached his death in very much the same sort of mind frame. Well, I'm dying, let's face it. There is no way out. In fact, I got a very strong message when I had a high LSD trip shortly before in the summer before he died, and it was all about Terrence. And and the message that came to me from this was the only way out is to go in. And I think Terrence went into it with that attitude, and he was at peace when he died. I mean, he was at peace. He had accepted it, and I think he approached it in kind of with the same attitude that he would approach psychedelics, or that any good scientist. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a curious person, and I think he approached it in that spirit. This is what's happening. This is what fate has decided for me. So let's see what happens. Of course, he hasn't reported back, as far as I know, on what happened. I hope he's out there somewhere in hyperspace or whatever it is.
And he's very much part of our culture today in conversation.
And still very much part of the culture. Interestingly, his voice is still very strong, and it's due to an invention which didn't exist when he passed on, which is basically YouTube. And he's achieved this virtual immortality on YouTube. And the things that he says, many of which are in late 90s or late 80s and mid 90s, I mean, they just don't seem dated at all. He couldn't anticipate what was going to happen, but on the other hand, his ideas, his prescience, if you will, was very strong. He could see it coming, and he commented. So he's very much part of the contemporary conversation, for sure.
Absolutely. So our next question is, this is more directed at mushrooms and Paul in general. I generally take mushroom supplements for immune support. Many medical mushrooms have been found to have antiviral properties. Given the current pandemic of COVID-19, do you have any ideas to which mushrooms may have the potential at combating the virus and improving the immune system?
Well, this is a specialty of mine, is the intersection between mushrooms and viral pathogens. And I've published a lot on this. And it's not responsible for me to say that I have any evidence of mushrooms fighting the COVID-19 virus. It is academically supported and defensible that many mushroom species, especially in the mycelial form, have shown to have profound antiviral activities by upregulating immunity and consequentially reducing the viral titers. So we're engaged right now in research in this very specific arena, but general immune support, good nutrition, healthy environment, reducing levels. These are all cofactors that can build your immunological strength, your armamentarium of defenses, to resist things like COVID-19. However, we do not have any evidence right now of mushrooms being able to prevent or lessen COVID-19. We do have lots of evidence of other viruses where we have been able to show this. But I would just say, stay tuned. This is a hyper focus of my interest right now and a lot of my research. So that's the most
What about other coronaviruses, Paul? Have mushrooms been tested against related viruses? Or not
yeah,
yet?
the coronavirus, it's a common cold virus. A lot of the common cold viruses are in the corona realm. If people see my TED talks, my TED Med talk, my recent Stanford Medical School talks, I go over the research that we did with the Project BioShield after 9/11. We found an old growth mushroom called agarikon that reduced pox viruses, flu viruses, herpes, that's weird because any virologists out there, some are DNA and the other ones are pox is DNA virus, flus are RNA viruses. And so normally you don't find a virucidal that would be applicable against both. Well, indeed, I think that's correct because what it does is upregulates immunity, and your immune system is able then to create defense mechanisms that then target the viral pathogen. So it's a much more complex. The immunological field is very complex. There's about 28 different interleukins, some that are associated with being antiviral, but some of which are anti-inflammatory. Now, seemingly a contradiction in terms. If you have an immune response, usually it's pro-inflammatory. And so when you have interleukins that can excite the immune system, but also are anti-inflammatory, that's new to medical science. How can you potentize the immune system and yet not have inflammation? That's what a lot of our research is on right now, is looking at at least 28 different interleukins. We're very excited about some of the research we recently have concluded, and it's opening up a lot of doors of opportunity. So I would say, try to support your immune system as best you can. Mushrooms can be very helpful, especially polypore mushrooms. Just make sure they're certified organic. And the mycelium is far more potent in the fruit bodies. So that's where a lot of our novel research has come into play.
There you have it, a report from the fungal front lines against the COVID epidemic. So keep up your good work, Paul. You're doing great work. This is really good. It's good to let people know about this.
Thank you, Paul, for that. And just while we have you here, there's a lot of questions around the development of your bee mushroom feeders and if they're available to the public.
Yeah, we made 1,000 of them. If you go to fungi.com/bees, you can sign up. My intention is to give 10,000, hopefully 100,000 of these away. As a citizen scientist, invention for citizen scientists to be able to help the immunity of bees. I published an article in Nature Scientific Reports with my co-authors from the USDA, Washington State University. Our reishi and amadou extracts, reishi extract, one treatment, 1% of this extract going in from the mycelium, going into sugar water, reduced the Lake Sinai virus more than 45,000 times in 12 days with one treatment. The deformed wing virus by hundreds of times. So this is an extraordinary breakthrough. That article in Nature is still in the top 1% of all articles ever published in the Nature publication ecosystem, because we're able to make the argument that a natural product can be more powerful than a pure pharmaceutical because it activates immunity factors. So because my dear good friend David Sensi was involved in helping this make these, but his factory got shut down because of COVID-19. So if people sign up at our website, we're sending these out for free. We're not selling them. I'll give away as many as I can afford to give away. And so if you check out the website, we're developing an app. The idea is people can upload information into the cloud. We can measure a pollination activity of wild bees as well as domesticated bees all over the planet. And then we have a sense of what's happening out in the ecosystem prior to crop harvest. If you know you only have 5% of normal bee activity in the ecosystem, well, you can predict that pollination services are going to be harmed and the crop failure can occur or loss of biodiversity of wild plants. So the idea is to help native bees as well as domesticated bees with this cute little thing. And we have some really great videos up. So people just be patient. I can only do so much. We have 1,000 of these right now in stock. We're trying to get them to thought leaders. And And I think there's over 26,000 people have signed up for it. And I hope to be able to give away 100,000 of them. But that could cost me over $500,000 to $1 million, all expenses told. And I'll do as much as I can. I walk my talk to the ability to the limits of my ability. So with people's support, we hope to get these out all over the planet.
Okay, very,
Amazing.
very good.
Thank you.
Do you, let me just ask you a bit about the bee protection. Does the mycelial extract, is it antiviral, or it's stimulating the immune system of the bees to resist viruses? Is that your current thinking?
It's called the mode of action, and we're trying to define that.
Okay.
Now, one of the interesting things that we have found, one of my colleagues and the co-author on our paper discovered that our extracts almost exactly fingerprint profile the mineral concentrations in pollen. And it turns out that there are pollination deserts now because of factory farming and monoculture. So rather than having all these diverse plants producing pollen at different weeks, you have a factory farm monoculture of one crop, all producing pollen within a week or two, and then the pollination desert. And so they get immune stressed because of lack of nutrition. So we know that they're immunologically challenged due to pollination deserts and lack of being able to get these natural forms. My discovery shows that bees go to rotted logs because of mycelium and because of immune benefit. We don't know the mode of action. But the fact is, there's no antiviral reducing viruses in bees until our discovery, none. And the effects that we're seeing that are helping to reduce the virus innately is so profound. If you went to a doctor, you had HIV, in the next week or 12 days later, they said you have 45,000 times less HIV than you had 12 days ago. The doctors would say, you're doing astonishingly well. We don't understand the mode of action. We think it's a very complex series of ingredients that are intersecting immunologically with the bees, and this is yet to be determined. But there's a phrase by Voltaire that I very much like, and I'd like for people to really take this home. Voltaire, the French philosopher, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Indeed.
Who cares how the mechanism of action, the fact that bees are living longer. Bees used to fly for 9 days. Now they're flying for 4 or 5 days. Honeybees. They will pollinate 1,000 flowers a day. Pollination services have been cut in half in the past 30 years. So let's not get lost in the weeds, so to speak, about the mechanism of action where we can see the results. So this is
exactly. The point is they work, right?
The problem with the regulatory environment, and people get hung up and making the arguments about the mechanism of action, they can't see the forest for the trees. So let's not the perfect be the enemy of the good. The fact is that these things work.
Right. And also, as you said, now this is a consequence. This is one of the unanticipated consequences we're seeing because of the sacrifice of biodiversity. So this is all very much relevant to what we're doing, factory farming, all these unsustainable petroleum-based agricultural systems. This is what happens when you sacrifice biodiversity.
And COVID-19, the prevailing theory is this because of the intersection of the loss of biodiversity in forests with human activity encroaching upon those ecosystems and stressing the immunity of those animals in their ecosystem. Zoonotic diseases mean diseases that come from animals. And many of these pathogens that we have been exposed to are incubated in stressed animal populations that are suffering, from all the obvious stressors that we're inflicting upon them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, very good.
So we have definitely a psychedelic crowd here, and there's a lot of votes on a question around when was the last time either of you took a significant journey on psychedelics, and is it still something you do on a regular basis?
Well, in some way, all journeys on psychedelics are significant, even if they don't have the outcome that you anticipated. So, Sometimes they're incredible revelations, sometimes not so much, but they always seem to be useful. As far as the last time I took a significant amount of psychedelic, for a long time I've been taking ayahuasca more regularly than mushrooms. I have to get back to it. And I have more recently. I can't put my finger on the last time.
I can put my finger on the last time.
Okay, good. You admit to federal felonies in front of 6,000 people.
I'm not telling you the date, and I'm not telling you the country. Okay.
Okay.
And my answer would be not enough. So, but there's the common phrase Alan Watts, and then Terrence used it. When you pick up the phone and get the message and hang it up. Nevertheless, the last time I did mushrooms, I immediately thought to myself, why am I not doing these more often? Setting is really, really important. So having the convergence of the calamity of just day-to-day life, just carving out the space and the time is really, really important. So I honor the question. For legal reasons, I can't specifically answer. But my official answer is not enough. Okay.
Not enough. Yes, I agree. I mean, we're all, like you say, we're pretty super busy people, so it is hard to carve out the time, and it's important to make that special time. You could even call it a sacred space and time in which to do these things. And it's not the frequency it's not the frequency that you do that counts. It's the quality of your experience, and one of the things that sets psychedelics aside is that for many people who take them for therapeutic purposes or spiritual explorations or whatever, I mean, they may only do it a few times in a lifetime, but they get what they need from it. Now, if you're a company that wants to commercialize psilocybin, this isn't good news, because you can't commodify the drugs, because people their use should be rare and special is kind of what I think. Optimize the conditions for having the experience, and don't worry about just because I've taken ayahuasca 1,000 times or whatever, Paul's probably taken mushrooms at least that many times. It doesn't matter. What matters is the experiences that you have are good, and you approach them thoughtfully, respectfully, and you try to optimize the quality of the experience. That's the more important thing, I think.
And these are special times where we need to have sacred experiences. So I think all of us being isolated, all of us reprioritizing our values and the importance of our families and our lovers and our friendships, this is an opportune time for us to really reevaluate who we are and what our purpose is in life. And we all will die. Breaking news. And so it's important that we face our own mortality with dignity and respect. And the decriminalization of psychedelics movements, I applaud them. And my mother recently died. Before my father died, he asked to trip with me on psilocybin mushrooms. I turned him down. I have a lot of regrets about that. But he was very religious, and I was so concerned I'd rattle his tree. It would change his whole view of reality. He would suddenly be aware of what he had been missing. And I didn't have that feeling of loss at the end of his life, that suddenly going, oh my God, now I understand. It was too much of a responsibility. So I sort of chickened out, frankly. I would have had more courage to say that this would have been really beneficial for him. We all have a right to how we die. Who is going to tell me, and what government's going to tell me, I don't have a right to take a psychedelic, on my deathbed? Really?
Right.
You're going to put me in jail after I die? Go ahead. My body will sit in jail. It makes no sense. It becomes absurd when there's laws outlining your basic human right to your own consciousness.
Yes, I think it is a basic human right. And lately I've been talking about the right to symbiosis. We should proclaim as a basic, not just human right, but organismic right, that people have the right to form symbiotic relationships with any plant or fungus or other organism that they want to. And I think that's how you address the very idea that you can criminalize something like psilocybin mushrooms or ayahuasca is absurd. And it's a reflection of this incredible arrogance that we have toward nature. And nature has just slapped us in the face and said, wait a minute, you need to remember a few things. Number one, you're not running the show, monkeys. So this is a way to start. This is a way to start. But that should be respected, just as we should be ready to respect people's choices when they are ready to pass on. If they want to take a psychedelic, that should be available to them. If they want medically assisted euthanasia, I believe they should have that right too. I mean, the important thing is death is right up there, one of the three most important things that you do, four most important things you do in life. One of them is dying. The other one, of course, is being born. And taking a psychedelic, I would put that among the four main things. The other one is making love. A person should make love at least once in their life, and hopefully many times, because this is an important expression of what it is to be human. So those four things, and the government regulators should keep their hands off of these things. These are sacred aspects of human existence and should not be prohibited or legally regulated in any way, in my opinion. Getting on the soapbox, sorry.
It's truly a birthright to have a healthy relationship with nature.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, we have about time for one more question here. And the audience is wondering if Paul or Dennis could both elaborate on certain places around the world that are best for travel to seek growth with psychedelics. And for those of us who wish to further career options and ways to help the psychedelic cause, what options would you recommend to either academically or a program for us to start that path?
It's not a simple question. There are many layers to this. I mean, the issue about tourism and going to indigenous people, indigenous places, and taking something like ayahuasca, it's a complicated matter, because that has positive and negative aspects to it. And I think maybe the coronavirus and what it's doing to travel is going to change that. I would prefer what we were talking about a little while ago about having centers in every community that one could go to so that people don't have to travel to get these experiences. They don't have to have the impact on these indigenous cultures that tourism produces. And I mean, I'm guilty. I organize retreats for ayahuasca and that sort of thing. What I would prefer is to be able to do this legally and out of the shadows in every community and bring the medicine to the people. Don't take the people to the medicine. Let the people in these indigenous communities produce it, export it legally, make that accessible, to people. As far as what you do, if you want to get involved in psychedelic work, in research, I mean, you don't really need me to tell you. People are finding their own way. Some choose science, some choose anthropology, some choose medicine, other approaches to it. There's plenty of resources out there, especially more than ever. These psychedelic societies, Facebook groups and so on. There's plenty of ways to find your place in the psychosphere or the psychedelicosphere, if that's what you want to call it. There are ways to find you just I think you just have to follow your intuition, and it will, trust your intuition, and you'll find your way. It's my feeling.
Yeah, I'll add that the California Institute for Integral Studies in San Francisco have a program specifically training psychedelic therapists. They're also a very good clearinghouse of referrals. There's MAPS US, maps.org. There's also MAPS Canada, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies by Rick Doblin, who's running the one in the U.S., and Mark Hayden, who's in Canada. There's a new Canadian Psychedelic Association just formed, but we're seeing this happening all over the world. So anyone, and no matter where you are, consider replicating the successes and following the models that have been tried and true and still evolving. But many of these organizations have a really good track record right now, and responsibly using and teaching and also interfacing with the government and in order to make sure that there's harm reduction and maximum benefit, and that these substances are not abused.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I do want to put in a plug for Hefter Research Institute, hefter.org. We're similar to MAPS, except nobody's ever heard of us, or fewer people, because we're not good publicists. But Hefter has, in terms of the research front, they've really contributed substantially to advancing the psilocybin research and the acceptance of psilocybin as a medicine. So they're also on the cutting edge. But as Paul says, you can tap into these communities of interest. You can find it. There's lots of ways. So I would say, follow. I mean, what excites you, go for that, and then connect with the people. I don't think you can separate doing environmental research, restoration research, biodiversity research. All of these things, they may not directly have to do with psychedelics, but they're very important. And they are relevant. So anyone that chooses to work in the life sciences, especially on both medicine and the what you might call natural history or whatever, I mean, absolutely encourage that. Yeah. I mean, I have spoken with graduate students at UBC who are in botany, who have never looked at a plant. And this is a problem. I mean, they're looking at test tubes, they're running DNA gels, they're doing all this kind of thing. Do you ever go out into the forest and communicate with plants? I think having this organismic perspective is very important. Sure, the molecular stuff is important too. That's not the whole story by any means. So I encourage that. Yeah.
Thank you. There are many ways to get involved in the psychedelic community, and many psychedelic societies out there to support people as a real access point and nexus center. So we have kind of a heady question here about microdosing with lion's mane, if there's any studies on neurogenesis and the effects in the rest of the central nervous system. For example, regeneration of optic nerves. And on the other side of the spore, with the larger doses, many people experience the voice or some type of entity. In your opinions, is this an external or internal creation? Or if Gaia hypothesis an accurate collective unconscious? Perhaps it is both.
Well, that's a two-part question. I can take the first part, but Dennis, I want you to take the second part.
I'm not going there, Paul. But the first part, you can answer the first part.
Yeah. Again, with the psilocybin analog, the legal ones, we've been doing comparison with lion's mane extracts, both the mycelium and the fruit bodies. And the mycelium is found to be profound in causing neurogenesis. The credit for this goes with the Japanese scientist by the name of Kawagishi, who first I became aware of it from a patent he filed in 1994, long since expired. And there's 2 clinical studies showing improvement with mild cognitive decline in pre-Alzheimer's-like patients. Our work has continued Kawagishi's work, and we are very robust models at multiple universities showing synergism. You'll like this, symbiosis between the psilocybin analogs and lion's mane, where coupling them together, it has far more profound neurogenesis benefits. This is neurite outgrowths as well as remyelination of the myelin on the axons of nerves that allow for neurotransmission. So the proliferation of new nerve endings leads to new synapses. I think lots more integration neurologically, and we think it has a better mental state, improvement. There's a great app that's been developed. It's at microdose.me, MICRO.me, and you can log in. It's anonymized, and you can actually do microdosing. And there's all sorts of visual acuity tests, hearing tests, tap tests to basically calculate your neurological state of being progressively over time, because we do decline as we get older. Hard for me to admit. But microdosing, I think, has enormous potential. A microdose is defined as being sub-threshold from you being able to feel it. Lion's mane you don't feel, but these other psilocybin and other compounds, you're taking a microdose that does not have any noticeable effect in your change of your consciousness. But some of the research is showing that microdosing is more powerful neurogenically than a single dose. And I think that's because cells need to regrow. And so you're microdosing, you're regenerating new cells. At one massive dose, sure, you're getting the experience, you'll get that stimulus, but then it goes out of your system pretty quickly. So the idea of microdosing is like a nootropic vitamin to be able to help, your mental health and your cognition due to improvement of your neurological systems. But Dennis, I'd love to hear you describe the voice and the entity part of that question.
I'm not going to go there. It's a can of worms, and I don't want to get into it, or we'll never get out of here. I would like to mention, though, I think there is something people should write down. Clinicaltrials.gov. Just that's a website that lists all FDA-approved clinical trials that are going on for anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be about psychedelics, but if you go to clinicaltrials, all one word, .gov, and search on psilocybin, you will see that the trials that are underway, that are anticipated, or that have been recently completed for different therapeutic targets. I believe there's one in process now that is a clinical trial for psilocybin for people with cognitive deficit, essentially pre-Alzheimer's people who are losing cognitive function. And that's a trial that you can look that up and apply for it, or apply for on behalf of someone you love. I think that trial is in progress right now. So these things, excuse me?
There's more than 20 universities right now that are currently conducting clinical trials with psilocybin approved by the respective governments in the United States, Canada, and Europe. Also, the website that I populate is unbranded, it's not commercial. It's mushroomreferences.com. This morning before this interview, I was reading 100 Google Scholar alerts, and go through them. And I curate this with one of my employees. And mushroomreferences.com, I write it for physicians and researchers. It's got like 50 articles on psilocybin, peer-reviewed journal articles, etc. But go to mushroomreferences.com. I update it about once a month. But it's several hundred pages long now that's curated specifically to help people look up things on lion's mane, look up things on dementia, psilocybin, etc. So
right. Yeah, I'm familiar with the site, and it's a great resource. It's a wonderful resource for this. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for this incredible talk. And, we're really creating a worldwide movement to propel us into the future here. So, Paul, where can the audience find you if they're new?
Well, my personal website is paulstamets.com. And that's where you can find me. But that's the best place for you to find what I've been up to and what I'm doing. paulstamets.com. It's kind of has a Star Trek theme. I'm a kind of a Star Trek kind of guy. So.
Yes, that's right. There's a character in the more recent Star Trek that is, I think, modeled after you, and his name is Stamets, right? And he's the ship, he's the expedition mycologist for Star Trek.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I work with the writers of Star Trek, and had them on the phone for about 2 hours and gave them the overall theme that became the Star Trek Discovery series. Anthony Rapp plays astromycologist Paul Stamets. And
astromycology. Now there's a career, a future career.
Yesterday, NASA reached out to me again. I went down and visited them at the Ames Research Center, and so the idea of growing mycelium for buildings and for creating habitats, on Mars and elsewhere, is something that they're very interested in. So, never underestimate the power of fungi.
Absolutely. Right.
And Dennis, where can the audience find you?
Well, they can find me at the McKenna Academy. Probably easiest way to reach me is just Dennis at McKenna.academy.
Modern Day Mystery
Find
School.
it through the website as well. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both so much for this talk, and I hope that we can continue to stay connected and honoring the life of Terrence and his legacy. So we're going to move into our breakout groups section, and we'll be back here at 2:20.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. This was
Thank
wonderful.
You,
Thank you. All right.
This is one for the books, if we still had books. Yeah. But thanks so much for joining us. This has been really fantastic. Fantastic, like the fungi. We didn't even get a chance to talk about this, but if anybody has a chance, look at this movie. It's out there. I think it's pretty much open access right now.
You can rent it for $4.99, which is less than a double shot espresso. So
yeah, best $4 you've ever spent. It's really a beautiful piece of cinematography. It's very inspiring, So thanks again. I guess we're going to the breakout session, and then we'll be back here at
2:20.
2:20. All right. I'll take
and
a little
big thank
break.
you to our audience.
May pop into one of those breakout sessions or not, but okay. Back to work.
Thank you.
Be kind, be courageous. Okay? All right.
Absolutely. Okay. Bye-bye.
And big thank you to our audience, all 6,089 of you. Thank you so much for being here and part of this experience. Don't leave. We have a lot more programming in store for you. And I'm going to walk us through the next portion now. We're going to move into our breakout groups where you can dive deeper into the talks, into the thought-provoking material of the talks. And each one of the breakout groups is moderated by the San Francisco Psychedelic Society team. So if you are new to Crowdcast, let me just guide you through this. So imagine we're in a house right now, and the house we're in the theater. And we just saw we were just on the main stage, and now we're going to break out into different rooms into the house. All right. So basically, you are going to go to the top of your screen where you see the name of the talk, the Paul Stamets Fireside Chat, and where it says more, ... click on more, ... and there you'll have a drop-down menu where you can choose a different breakout group. And feel free to go between in and out of each group. If you find a group that you really like, we encourage you to stay there. So pick the group of your choice, and be patient as you're going into the breakout group, because sometimes it takes a minute for this platform to host all of these people and break them out into different rooms. If you're on mobile, the session is at the top of your screen, so just pull it down from the top of the screen. And once you enter into the breakout group of your choice, type something in the chat, because the facilitator doesn't know that you're there. So it's helpful for the facilitator to know if you're in the chat room. And also, if you are wanting to go up on screen and ask a question or interact with the group, just be sure to test your mic and your camera so that it's working. And sometimes it doesn't work, so you just have to reload your page. And feel free to ask questions as well. And there's a really supportive community here, so I'm sure people can help you out in the group. And also type in to the chat box to raise your hand so that the facilitator knows that you're in there. So we are going to be back here at 2:20, and we're going to hear from Dennis again and Dr. Bruce Damer, and come back here at 2:20. So thank you all so much for being here. And if you can't find the breakouts on your iPhone, you go from the top of the screen down. Dr. Wade Davis at 2:20. So I will see you back here then. Thank you.